What's up guys, my name is Robert Rushing and today's video is going to be a review on the Huracán Evo Spyder rear wheel drive. Today's video I'm going to tell you about this car specifically, the differences between the all-wheel drive and the rear wheel drive version of this car, and then how you can get behind the wheel for yourself. Without further ado, let's get into the review. So the dead giveaway of what version of the Huracán you're looking at is from the front. When it has this fin here, fins that cut this way, you know that this is a rear wheel drive version of the car. There's a few differences other than the lip, the front. You're gonna also see a bigger, more exposed radiator in the front. All of these things are letting you know this is the rear wheel drive version of the car. We can put a picture of the all-wheel drive version of the car so you can see the differences in the front. But that is a dead giveaway of what type of car you're looking at. So out of all the different types of the Huracán, the one we're looking at today is also nicknamed the LP610-2. 610 translates to us in the US about 602 horsepower. -2 means power to the rear two wheels. The Huracán has different numbers and different LP numbers to identify the different types of cars. The original Huracán had cars like the 580-2 and the 610-4. This is the 610-2, meaning it is the new Evo, which has 602 horsepower and power to the back two wheels. Moving along, the next thing I want to point out is the brakes on this car. You can kind of see in the distance the different versions of the Huracán, the older model of this car, which is kind of cool. Now that we're reviewing the Evo, let's talk about the specifics here. Looking at the brakes, you're going to notice the rotors have these interesting grooves all around. This is a cast iron rotor and actually is a steel brake. It's a 10-piston brake inside of this gorgeous red brake caliper. Speaking of the colors and the spec of this car, this paint is actually called Grigio Lynx. It's a really nice color and we really like how this goes with the red, which goes with the rest of the interior, which I'll show you in a moment. There are a few options I want to point out before we move on to the interior. A few different ways you can tell the Evo versus the Huracán in the back is obviously the exhaust system has been moved up here. You can see these exhaust tips are actually black. That is an additional option you can pay extra for, which we think is a nice touch. Also, a big difference between the all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive version of the Evo is this diffuser. This diffuser has been painted to match the body color of this car, Grigio Lynx, which we think looks awesome. But I do want to show you, we'll have a pop-up picture of the Evo all-wheel drive, which has a slightly different diffuser. You can see the differences here. This whole back bumper is designed differently. It does not look like the normal Huracán. It is newer, it looks awesome, and this, being the Spyder version of the car, has a different back hatch. Let's check that out now. Looking at the top, you do not see a big glass panel, which allows you to look through and at the V10 engine that powers the Huracán. The Spyder has this hatch instead, but the design does look really good. Now, when you get a little lower, you can slightly peek in through these slats to see that beautiful V10 engine, which in this car produces 602 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque. This being one of the lightest versions of the Evo makes this power to weight ratio insane. Before we get into how this actually feels to drive, let me show you what the interior looks like. Let's go over the rest of the specs of this car and let you know a few Easter eggs on this new touchscreen. Now sitting inside the Evo, the spec is awesome. All black with red stitching and red piping on the seats. The leather, the Alcantara on the door panel, the leather on the steering wheel, all of this is awesome. And the main difference between the Huracán and the Evo is this giant touchscreen that replaces all of the buttons and the switches and the turn. This is way better. It's awesome, and I'm gonna show you a few Easter eggs about this in a second. This still has the same hidden in plain sight cup holder as the Huracán did. And what I wanna do before we turn this car on is remind you guys to give this video a like because it helps growth of our channel a lot. Without further ado, V10. Sounds like a monster. Now, this infotainment has two things I want to show. You might quickly want to change the volume of the radio, and all you have to do is with two fingers on the bottom here, slide up and down to adjust the volume. Now what's cool is with three fingers, you can pause and play it just like that. This feature is really cool when you're driving, so you don't have to go and look and try to find where the volume is and how to stop and start the music. It's really simplified, so you could basically be driving, have your full attention on the road, and still passively make the changes that you need to. There are significantly fewer buttons in the Evo than in the Huracán, but I'm gonna really quickly go through all the buttons so you know what all of these do and how you can properly operate the Huracán Evo for yourself. Out of all these buttons from left to right, the operations are your driver window, the front lift, the emergency traction control system, hazard lights, parking cameras, automatic start stop, so when you're at a red light the engine can cut itself off and hopefully save you some gas, and then the passenger window. All of these switches are designed to look like a fighter jet, and it's the same design in the other Huracan models. This touchscreen is super handy. It allows you to control all the media, all of the AC controls, and it's very simple and user-friendly, and we love it. Then you have this giant start-stop button, like in all Lamborghinis. To pull up is to go into reverse, P is to park, M is to force you to use the paddle shifters. It's like M for manual, but it's gonna let you use these paddle shifters even if you're in Strada. This will force you to use these shifters. Under that is the parking brake, and then there's a switch to the left and the right. The one on the left is to take up and put down the roof, and the one on the right is to control the little window here, which makes a big difference in the audio and the acoustics while you're driving. What's really cool about the Evo Spyder is it only takes 14 seconds for the whole roof to come all the way up, and you can do this from a rolling speed of 30 miles an hour or slower. If you are literally in traffic and you notice it's about to rain, fret not, you can take the roof down and not worry about causing all this traffic behind you. You can start to roll as you finish reclining the roof. Next, let's take this car on the road and tell you what it's like to drive. So just like all different Huracan models, previous models, the all-wheel drive, the rear-wheel drive, and the Evo, all have the same steering wheel. You got your turn signals on the left. You have your windshield wipers on the right, and your anima on the bottom, which is Italian for soul, and how you switch through the 3 drive modes that comes on the Evo. Just like the Huracan, you have Strada for comfort, Sport for sport, and Corsa for race. If you're in and out of Lamborghinis as often as we are, you'll notice a few things like the amount of cabin space and the difference between the Huracan Coupe versus the Huracan Spyder. You make a slight trade when you opt for no roof. That's gonna come with slightly less width here in your cabin. Your steering wheel is gonna be a pinch closer to your knees, and for a tall guy like myself, you're gonna notice it. Some people might not. Either way, this car is a blast. Now, as far as the driving experience goes, I'm gonna focus a little bit on the differences between the all-wheel drive and the rear-wheel drive version of the Evo Spyder. Being in the rear-wheel drive version, you also opt out of the all-wheel steering that comes in the all-wheel drive version of this car, which does mean that this has a lighter curb weight than the all-wheel drive. Also, being a rear-wheel drive, you definitely feel all of the power put to the rear of the car. The weight distribution is a little different, so you don't feel as planted as you do in the all-wheel drive. This version of the car definitely feels like a 40 in the front, 60 in the back weight distribution. You don't feel the same power coming from the front as you do in the other version of this car, which for the purist, the person driving this car, there's a little, dare I say, like a little more danger involved in driving this version of the car, which is fun, a little scary, and super Lamborghini. Also, when you're in sport, just like all other Lamborghini models, you'll hear the exhaust open up and you'll get a different note coming out of the back of the car. In Sport and Corsa, you will hear pops and bangs from the factory exhaust, which is just, it's what you want. It's what people come to expect. You're gonna drive a convertible Lamborghini, it's loud, it's fun, you're gonna hear the pops and cracks. Now the Evo also has the Rheological suspension system, which is magnetic. This allows the car to like dampen itself and adjust itself and keep you, the driver, a little more planted, making the suspension system feel really nice for a supercar. Wild. The Huracan is really the perfect supercar for somebody who has no experience driving a supercar. It does all of the work for you, it's easy, and it's a blast. And it might just like pique somebody's interest who might not be a car person yet, but this might send them over the edge. You know, it's approachable and just fun. Okay guys, this is gonna conclude our review of the Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spyder rear-wheel drive. And I know that's a mouthful to say, but this car alongside all of the different versions of the Huracán are all provided by MPH Club, and this is a company that lets you get behind the wheel for yourself. This is a rental car, and you can rent this by the day, the week, for the month, or as long as you want. We also ship cars all across the country, so if you have any questions about pricing, feel free to reach out to us. Go into the links down below and you're gonna find our contact info, and let us know if you wanna drive the Evo, the Huracán, the all-wheel drive, the rear-wheel drive, or whatever type of Lamborghini you want. If you check out our website, you'll see all the different offerings. MPH Club has a huge fleet. Go check it out. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.